There we go. Those online. I am so sorry it's taken me this long, 8 minutes to get back online. I had a problem with the fact there's a YouTube overlay kept showing up over top of the image you're seeing right now. So let's jump in here. I got to make sure I get myself started. Here we go. So we're going to jump right in. So this is week 41. We're into the book of Esther. This is the last of the books, the stories that are within the literary timeline, and we'll get into that as we go through. I've had to break it into two different sections. This night it'll be a little shorter, but just because of the length of what we're going to discuss when we're in this story. This is such a wonderful, wonderful story as we begin. So I have to. So today we step back and we recapitulate back into the timeline with the book of Esther, and we're going to look at the people who are left behind in exile. The last couple weeks we talked about in Ezra and Nehemiah. And Ezra, we began looking at the fact that the Cyrus the Great has released 10% of the population of Israelites. They went back and they rebuilt the temple. And so this is what we're going to see. And I bring up this timeline. I know this is a lot of information, a little screen. But if you can see, and within it, you can see where it begins with Cyrus the Great decrees the Jews may return in 538. But where we're at right now is in 483. So 100 years later, roughly, not 100 years later, 50 some odd years later, we jump into here. We jump here. So this is the portion of timeline we're looking at. In 43, we look at Xerxes. Xerxes gives a banquet, and that's where the story begins. You can look on this timeline, and you see over here in the bottom right-hand corner, 458 BCE, Ezra leads a group of exiles to Jerusalem in Ezra 7:8, and up at 460. So that's where you're seeing. So this is taking place in between of Ezra and Nehemiah's arrival into Israel, into Jerusalem. So that's where I want to get you to realize we're stepping back in time and recapitulating back into the timeline. So let's begin in chapter 1. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes. The Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. Well, in your translations, we're translating into India and Kush. They were different names at the time. And to understand that, I want you to think about 127 provinces is very similar to 127 states. Each province they had a prince or a leader within the leadership of each province, like we have governors, etc. So they would be ruling each province for Xerxes. So in 722, to bring us back, just remember, then in 722, the Assyrian Empire captured the northern kingdom. So that's what we saw them go into exile. And in 586, the Babylonian Empire conquers Assyria and captures the southern kingdom. So, and that's where we'll see the temple be destroyed when that happens. And in 539, we're coming back earlier, is the fact is when Cyrus the Great conquers Babylon and establishes the Persian Empire. So Xerxes is the fourth ruler of the Persian Empire. So that's what we want you to think about. So he's number 4. So here is a rock relief of what Xerxes, who he was. And we continue in the story. Well, at that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa. So we're going to see on the map where Susa is. And in the 3rd year of his reign, which is 483 BCE, he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials, the military leaders of Persia and Media. The princes and the nobles of the provinces were present. That's what I'm saying. There's 127 provinces. So the princes and nobles of those provinces are there. Now I have to ask you this question. When you read, did you think about why would he give such a banquet? Well, there's a reason. It's not in this. It's not in the text itself, but we know from history, other history sources, what's taking place. We see we've learned about. We saw the Assyrian Empire rise, and we saw it fall. We know that in the Assyrian Empire, we saw that decline began in 701 BCE when they attacked Jerusalem, and then the angel of the Lord defeated them, killing 186,000 soldiers. Well, following the Assyrian, when that fell, the Babylonian Empire at the same time was rising, growing in strength, and it would ultimately conquer the Assyrian Empire and take more land and territory and become the ruling nation. Followed by that, the Babylonian Empire would begin to fall as the Persian Empire began to rise. And today, as we're reading here, we know in Xerxes, it is beginning to fall. It's beginning to fall because we see the Greece is beginning to rise in power. We know Greece will rise to power. In 330 BCE, we will see Alexander the Great come to full power as he captures and takes over the whole known world at the time. He'll rule from about 330 to about 320. And then we start seeing we'll start seeing a decline take place after that. And in the time of Christ, we see the Roman Empire has taken control. Well, Xerxes is throwing the banquet because he wants to go to war against Greece. And to prevail in war, one must have the leadership and the people on their side. So what is taking place? Xerxes is gathering this support by inviting all these officials, etc. He's trying to raise support for not only the leadership of all the provinces, etc., the military commanders, etc., but the people. So he's showing this great wealth. He's showing himself off. He's showing what great power he has. So they will stand behind him. And I said before, we'll look and see. This is where Susha is. You can see on the map. We've received this map before, so you should have it in one of your other documents. And so we see Susha is right below Elam, towards Media, which you can see that was part of the Babylonian Empire, and Persia is more onto the south. Then we see this is a more ancient map drawing of what this area looked like, and you will note I circled where Susha is, and it goes further than the previous map. This map cuts off. This is going over into what Asia, India, Pakistan, etc., what it is today. And you can also notice the names are not the same as what it is they are, what the English translation would be for today. So again, another map showing you Susha again in a light of Iraq, Iran, etc., the territories that are there today that we look upon as we look at our maps today. Well, Xerxes is having this splendid banquet, and he did it for a full 180 days. He displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. So that's what he first began by showing off and showing all the people who were in the Susha and gathered, all those who came to visit, etc. They would see all this great wealth. Well, when these days were over, the king gave a banquet, and that banquet lasted 7 days. I asked this in the day class. I said, can you imagine going to a banquet for 7 days? Most of us struggle to stay up past 9 o'clock sometimes. But 7 days straight to go to a banquet, one giant party. Now, it was in the enclosed garden. He held it in the enclosed garden of the king's palace for all the people from the least to the greatest who were in the citadel of Susha to see and witness, because the garden was able to be seen outside of the palace grounds. Well, in the garden, it had hangings of white and blue linen, fastened with cords of white linen and purple material to silver rings on marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, and mother of pearl, and other costly stones. I always ask the question, well, that just sounds like our houses, right? That was just, can't imagine the wealth and what is being showed. Wine was served in goblets of gold, each one different from the other, and the royal wine was abundant, keeping the king's liberality. Each guest basically received a welcome gift, a golden goblet designed specifically for them of solid gold, to take to the wine bar, so to speak, and ask for any wine they may choose. But the fact and the restrictions on them were none. In fact, by the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink with no restrictions, for the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man what he wished, so each person could receive as much as or little as they desired. Same time, Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of the king Xerxes. So those who came with their wives, etc., would have gone off into a separate banquet being held in a separate area on that. And on the seventh day, when King Xerxes, of the seventh day of the banquet, this has been going on for 7 days. And I love how it says, when in high spirits from wine, I guess we could say plastered, drunk, very inebriated, or whatever. He is there with all the other men, and they're talking and sharing and telling each other all their great stories, etc., what they have, what their wealth is, their spouses, their lives, etc., their children, all the things you talk about. And there in the midst of these high spirits, he's with all these men in bravado, etc. He looks over to the 7 eunuchs who work for him, who work within the harem, and he says, he tells them to go and bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, in order to display her beauty. Well, if you read that, did you read into that to understand that what he's asking is for Queen Vashti to come to display her royal beauty with nothing more on than the royal crown, to be naked in front of the men, to show her beauty. In this time frame and in the time frame that continues on, they worship the body and the beauty of the body. So for him to ask for this, here he's drunk, inviting her to come down before those others who are inebriated, who've been drinking wine for 7 days. We can understand that when the eunuchs arrive, they tell her this is what she's supposed to do. They deliver his command. The Queen Vashti refuses to come. When they go back to tell him, he becomes very furious and burned with anger. Can you imagine why? He's being slighted. He feels embarrassed because his wife would not do what he asked her to do. The queen did not respond to his demands. So he did what many men do. Since he was customary for the king to consult experts in matters of law and justice, he spoke to the wise men who understood the times. Remember, this is a patriarchal society. Men are in charge. And these men, they understood, and they were also closest to the king. These Karshina, Shetar, Admatha, and Tarshi, Meris, and Marsina, and Mamukan, all are the 7 nobles who are very close and who the king can trust. So these 7 nobles of Persia, Media, who had special access to the king and were highest in the kingdom. These are the ones that he allows to be close to him and he seeks guidance from all the time. So the question is asked, according to the law, what must be done to Queen Vashti? He asked them. She has not obeyed the command of the king Xerxes that the eunuchs have taken to her. She has not done what I told her to do. Well, then Mamerkin replied in the presence of the king and the nobles. He says, Queen Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king, but also against all the nobles and the peoples of all the provinces of King Xerxes. So it's not only against the king, but it's also again, all the nobles that were there in the at that seventh day of the party, who are also there. She has just shamed not only him, but he has shamed them, has shown them, stood up against them, which was wrong. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, and so they will despise their husbands and say, again, in a patriarchal society, you do not want the women of the society responding back in ways that are not appropriate for what they understand. They respond, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. So that's what they're afraid of. So this very day, the Persian and Median women of nobility who have heard about the queen's conduct will respond to all the king's nobles in the same way. There will be no end to disrespect and discord. So that's what we see. We're at that place. I can think of that some of these things that took place as late in our world in the 60s, the 50s and 60s within our society. Therefore, if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. And also let the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she. Queen Vashti has been fired, and she is no longer queen. Then when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout all the vast realm, all the women will respect their husbands from the least to the greatest. So they are going to use her as an example. If you're asked to do something, you shall do it. Well, the king and his nobles were pleased with this advice, so the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent dispatches to all of the kingdom, to each province in its own script, and each people in their own language, proclaiming that every man should be ruler over his own household using his native tongue. Well, Xerxes has now fully captured the approval of the leadership and the people to make a divisive strike against Greece, to defeat them before they can rise to power. That was his plan. That's what he wanted to do, is to get them before he saw them rising to power, but it wouldn't work out for him. So as we end chapter 1, we see this is what he's preparing to do. And I brought in here that this is just telling you what took place. Is King Xerxes of Persia would be defeated by the Greeks at the battle of Salamis in 480. So about three years later, he would go into battle first, and it went on for a year or two. And in fact, that battle made a decisive turning point in the Greco-Persian War, where the Greek fleet, led by Themistocles, lured the Persian navy into a narrow strait and destroyed it. So they were able to destroy his entire navy. Then they also defeated and forced Xerxes to retreat back to Persia, effectively ending the invasion of Greece. Now there is some interpretation. They said Xerxes at one point had won battles, and the very end he would lose. And this is what's taking place. So we enter into chapter 2. So chapter 2 is opening up, and this is when we read directly through. Sometimes we need to understand the context of when it's being written. Many times in your notes, and if you're a study Bible, you will see these things being brought forth for you, and that really helps you understand, because the text itself doesn't stop and say this is what's happening, because for the Jews who wrote it, who are translating the oral words into the written words, were taking these things. Would not have seen a need to explain what is taking place, but for us to understand, they would know what had taken place. We just need to understand what's taking place. So when King Xerxes, his fury had subsided, he remembered Vashti. Oh, my queen. Oh, what have I done? I have banished my queen. She is the one that comforted me, took care of me. I made her queen because she connected with me. She was the one. She was my queen. So here he is now remembering and mourning for her, and the personal attendants see this. So they come back and say, let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Sounds like a good idea. Let the king appoint commissioners in every province of his realm to bring all these beautiful women into the harem of the citadel of Susha. Let's have like Miss America or Miss World. For him, it had been Miss World. All the 2027 province was a whole beauty contest, and the one that would win within their province would be sent to the citadel in Susha. When they arrived in Susha, let them be placed under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch. He's in charge of the whole harem, and let the women let beauty treatments be given to them. Then let the young women who please the king, let the young woman who pleases the king, be queen instead of Vashti. And this advice appealed to the king, and he followed it. So he said, "Yeah, let's do that." Now, there was a citadel of Susha, a Jew in the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai. This is where we get Mordecai is a very important member, part of the story. He is the son of Jair, the son of Shimea, the son of Kish. Who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Now, Mordecai was not. This is basically his great great grandfather. Kish, who was driven from Israel and sent into the diaspora of Babylon, and the fact at the time. So that's what we're letting you know what his lineage is and how he got where he is. But we go on further in the story and understand Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he brought up because she had neither father or mother. Her mother and father had died, and this young woman was also known by the name of Esther. Now, Esther means star. So if you want that, we always like to know what the names mean, because sometimes those names have an important symbolism of the story, and really this does, because Esther really is the star, the bright point within the story. And she had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. When the king's ordered an edict had been proclaimed, many young women were brought to the citadel of Susha and put under the care of Haggai. Esther was taken to the king's palace and trusted to Haggai, who had charge of the harem. Now, today we think about something that goes to Miss America or whatever. They're going there for the opportunity for scholarships and other fame that they can gather, etc. Maybe that it lifts them up and puts them in a position that they would never have received many times based upon their socioeconomic status within society. Same thing takes place back then. And the fact, here's a beautiful young woman who has no future because her father or her parents are poor, they're the lower classes, etc. They would not have the opportunities. And here you have an opportunity to go and to be with the king, to be lifted up. And at the same time, when you get lifted up, your family gets lifted up along with you. And the fact, and if you get pregnant by the king, your child is going to be raised within the royal household. They'll be given a great education. You're going to be provided for all these things. So there's a strong reason for someone to consider doing this. Well, this is a painting by Edwin Long of his interpretation of what Esther looked like. So you can give that. You can see in that picture the beauty of who she is. Well, when she gets to Haggai, Esther shows up. Haggai is interviewing all of the... Hang on, I got to do one thing, people. Make sure I'm still there. He is interviewing all 127 of the candidates, coming from one from each province. So Haggai is going to get to know them, see who they are, see how they act, see their demeanor, all those things, and he also is very aware of what type of person the king likes. So when he meets meets Esther, she pleased him and won his favor. And immediately he saw this is the one. He provided her with beauty treatments and special food. He assigned her 7 female attendants, selected from the king's palace, and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. Why? If he takes care of her and she is the one, she will take care of him at the same time. Well, Esther had not, this is an important story, Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. At the time, even though they were brought into exile, again, those of Jewish faith, it's like we see it all the way through our world today, all the history we know. Many times people look down upon them, etc., so that not to tell someone and to keep it secret, etc., allowed her to have more favor, more things happen to her, more opportunities open up for her, such as the opportunity she has right now before her. So that's what we see. So each one of the 127 women, of the girls, are going to go and be with the king. So before a young woman's turn came to go to the King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, 6 months of oil and myrrh, and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. And this is how that she would go to the king. So that all 127 girls would have the opportunity to say anything that they wanted was given to them to take with them from the harem to the king's palace. So you can imagine the things. What would they want? Or the things that you would think of how to dress, etc. All those things that you would possibly want. Well, in the evening she would go there to go to the palace, and the king would receive her in his royal chambers. And in the mornings, they return back to another part of the harem to be cared for by Shaska, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the concubines. Because they went from being a beauty contest women, one of his anticipation, once they have been with the king and slept with the king, they move into one of his concubines, unless that she would not return to the king unless he was pleased with her and summoned for her by name. She would still be in the harem, in the concubine section. If she became pregnant, that child will be raised up in the royal household, will be given the great education, etc. And at the same time, her family will be taken care of at the same time. So it's a great honor, a great thing that could happen. And their hopes is the fact that he will remember their name and want her to return. Well, when Esther's turn came, she asked for nothing other than what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the harem, suggested. She had become close to Haggai, and again, Haggai being head of the harem, he would know what the king liked. If it's from a night negligee or whatever, the fact of how she should dress, what she should look like, how her hair should be, he would know what the king's likes were. He would know what for her to bring with him, to bring with her when she went to the palace, so that the king would find favor with her. So, and Esther did. She went and found favor. And she found favor, and she was taken to the King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. So this is actually taking place. She is not one of the first. She's one of the later ones that is going. And now the king was attracted to Esther. She wore all the right things, did all the right things, more than any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. So Vashti is basically exiled within the harem, and that she will never be seen again. And the king gave a great banquet. And Esther's banquet For all his nobles and officials, he proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. So he's bringing there, and he's showing her off. As today we would say, this is his arm candy, is a fact. Well, Mordecai does hang around the front gate. Mordecai is a low-level official. That's why he's hanging around the front gate. That's where business is taken care of. And within the great cities, etc., it's always at the front gate where people are coming for counsel, coming for ruling on matters of need, etc. So Mordecai is there. And so when the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting in the king's gate. So Esther, Esther has kept who she is, her family background, nationality is all. That she is from Israel. All those things that kept she's Israeli. She's never been to Israel at this point, and she had followed what was doing. But during the time of the second gathering, he is sitting there at the king's gate. And Bigthana and Tersha, who are the king's officers who were guarding the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. They're seeing what's going on, and they're angry. But Mordecai hears here's the plot, and he goes and tells Queen Esther, who she in turn brought it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. So when the king hears this, then when that report was in, he had it investigated and found it to be true, these two officers will be impaled on poles. Now, I have a picture of I was trying to be gracious, and what this looks like, you can get an idea. It'd be a sharp, pointy pole in which they would be hoisted up on a rope, and they would basically come down and sit upon it, and your imagination can tell you what's going to happen. It is a very painful but very quick death, because as this pole goes up through the body, it's piercing the organs and piercing the heart. And we think about this horrific death that this is taking place, but it's during the Persian Empire. At the same time, they are looking for ways to extend this pain and this suffering for those who would see it would be aghast and in fear not to ever disobey what is being told to them. So those that they would all have witnessed, the population is witnessing these two officers being impaled. From this becomes what we know as crucifixion, of nailing someone to a cross or to boards, and the fact in hanging them up to extend the amount of pain and suffering that would take place, which extends to the people around, hearing the screams of pain and agony. It just reinforces that you shall not disobey. And this will continue on through the Roman Empire. When chapter 3 hits here, we see Haman. So after all these events took place, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. The best way I could explain it was Haman is similar to what Joseph was to the Pharaoh. Joseph was the second in command, and Haman is the same way. And it's a seat of great honor, and because of that, all the royal officials of the King's Gate they was given the same honor they gave the king. So the royal officials of the King's Gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. You came before him, you would bow down and pay honor. Now this is the difference of the Israelites. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. I always ask the question, why? Well, for an Israelite, the only place they would bow down and pay honor or kneel or prostrate themselves was before God. So, and that's what they lived at that. The kings, King Cyrus and other ones had allowed them to continue this practice, understanding that they would show honor in a different way to them, and they obeyed, but they would not. This was against their faith. But for Haman, It was not. It was a slap in his face. So the officials at the king's gate would look at Mordecai and says, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for they had been told, they had told them he was a Jew. Again, I put in that Jews only prostrate themselves before God. Well, Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. He was enraged. He was mad. He says, "Why wasn't this? Everybody else pays me honor. Why won't he do it?" And yet, having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. But no, he instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. Remember, Cyrus was very tolerant. The kings before them have been very tolerant. Xerxes has put Haman in power, but his Haman, we go further, is Xerxes really paying attention to what Haman is saying? Does he know who the people are? He is no longer taking care of all the people and giving them honor and giving them the ability to worship as they so fit in their own countries. Well, at that point, I remind you that only 10% of the population has moved back into Jerusalem, where they were rebuilding the temple. So that's where we are. 42,360 is what went. So we got another 400,000 or so more being held back in the Persian Empire. In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, the pur, that is the lot, was cast. They would cast the lot in the presence of Haman to select a day and a month. And this is what, they're going to select a day and a month that something's going to happen. And this lot fell on the 12th month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, so he knows when he wants to do it, he says, "There is a certain people dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, who keep to themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administrators for all the royal treasury." So the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman. The signet ring is a sign of approval, sign what will be docked on all the documents, etc. So Haman, the enemy of the Jews, now has the signet ring. He says, the king looks at him and says, "Keep your money and do with the people as you please. You're in charge. I give you authority. You take care of it. I don't want to be involved." Then on the 13th day of the first month, the royal secretaries were summoned. They would write out these orders for each province in the language of each people, based upon Haman's orders and the king's satraps, the governors of various provinces and nobles of the various people. These were written in the name of King Xerxes himself and sealed with his own ring. The signet ring would be the seal upon the document, the wax seal, that would be there to say this is official. Dispatches were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the orders to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month of Adar, March 7th, 473 BCE. Not only to kill them, but those who kill them and destroyed, parents, grandparents, and children and babies. They are to plunder their goods. They're to take all that they have. It becomes theirs. So a copy of this second edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so be ready for that day. Well, it's being issued to everyone, so those of Jewish faith would also know what is being proclaimed. So the couriers went out and spurred by the king's command, and the edict was issued. And I always love when the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. Think of this as, again, you think of what Cyrus the Great had done, and how he was sending the people back to their homelands to rebuild his kingdom. That's why Persia was on such a rise. It's why Persia was becoming so powerful, because in fact he was becoming so wealthy because he was sending the people back. He was taking care of them, honoring them, and in turn they would honor him, because he was asking them to pray for him as much as when they return. Pray for his gods to honor him. So those things are taking place. So it's March. So we know March 7th, 473, is the date of annihilation of the Jews. Again, reminders: Cyrus the Great has sent some of them back. So 473. Well, here Ezra will lead a group of Israelites on August 4th, 458. Well, 473. Remember, counting down. 15 years prior to 458, so it'd be 15 years later that the Jews are going to be sent back. And the same thing with Nehemiah will arrive on the March-April time frame of 445. So that's why we said this is recapitulated back in the story for you to read. Well, chapter 4 is where we jump to, and this is where we come to the end for the night. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes. Again, they could not send these edicts out, etc., without all the people knowing, and everyone, including those of the Jewish faith. So he's mourning the typical passion of mourning, of tearing your clothes and putting on sackcloth and marking yourself with ashes. Think about this as what we do on Ash Wednesday. We put ashes on our thing as a sign of mourning and respect. And they went out into the city wailing loudly and bitterly. This is a method of mourning. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter into the city. In every province to which the edict and order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and many of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. So think about what you would have done if an edict like this is being said, that you know specifically on what day you're going to die and lose everything. We have to remember that roughly, 0.7% is the population of the Jewish people within the world today. And they have been through one annihilation after another. One horrible thing has happened to another to them. But they have kept their faith and kept moving forward. So when Esther's eunuchs and the female attendants came and told her about Mordecai, Esther has no idea what's being shared, what the edicts has been sent out. She is in the isolation of the harem, so she doesn't have any idea. She would send clothes down for him, thinking, well, something must be wrong. I'm going to send him have some nice clothes to put on. She doesn't understand he's mourning, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, and signed to attend to her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. Why won't he accept this? Why won't he put on some decent clothes? What's going on? So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in the front of the king's gate. Well, Mordecai would tell him everything that's happened, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay for the destruction of the Jews, because he was mad because Mordecai would not kneel down. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict. So here he himself has a copy of it, which had been published in Susha. They had to bring it back to, and he told him to instruct her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. So Hathach went back and reported this to Esther, what Mordecai has said. Well, she would send him back and instruct him to go back and says, all the king's officials and people of royal provinces know that any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned by the king the king has just one law. You do not go, you just don't walk up and knock on the door and show up. Because the law is that they enter in without being requested, they will be put to death unless the king extends that golden scepter that he carries to them to spare their lives, to say, come in. And she also tells him, but 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. So it's been a while since he hasn't called for me. It's been 30 days since the last time he called me to go be with him. So he goes back and tell Mordecai, so we're back. He says, and he's in turn sent words back to her. He says, do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. Don't think that because you're there and you think no one knows at this point that you're going to be able to escape this edict, because the edict is for all Jews, no matter who they are, to be put to death. For you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. That God will arise in a different way. That relief's going to come in a different way. Within the book of Esther, you will never see the word, the mission of God. So we have to surmise what is taking place. But you and your father's family will perish, and who knows, but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Is this everything that's happened for you, the blessings you received, to be put in the position you are, is this why you're in this position, to be able to help? So that's the question. So we move towards the end. Well, the Esther sends a reply to Mordecai, says, go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it's against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. Why is it illegal to go in to see the king without him asking for you specifically to enter? Because he's constantly being threatened. That's why the cupbearer is so important. People are trying to poison him. People are going to try to kill him, etc. That's why the 2 officers are put to death, because they're threatening to kill the king. So all these things are that. And for a woman to go, and for even his queen to show up, if we study history and the kings know history, many times the one who has put the king to death is his own queen. So that's why it's illegal even for her to step before him. So as we end tonight, we know this law cannot be repealed. And we have to ask ourselves, what will happen to Mordecai and what will happen to Esther? Now, I know most of you have already read the whole story, just like I. So you have a good idea. You're going to see, and we're going to talk about this next week. Well, not this next week. Remember, I'm out of town this coming week. For the week after next, it's on the website, gives you the links, and it tells you what's coming up. We will return to part 2, and we'll continue the story. Let's say a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, as we close the night, we just ask for a blessing to be placed upon us as we can continue to study your word and continue this journey with you. Lord, we ask all this through your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. I'm wishing everyone a blessed night.